Hey, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to class.
How's everybody?
Good to see you folks. Aha, here we are. Uh-oh. Let me rotate my little screen down just a little bit. I forgot to fix my screen today. There we go. All right, welcome to class. It's good to see everybody today. Got a pretty good crowd, 18 people. I know I was echoing. I had my phone on. Somebody told me to use my phone as my texting tool in here, and so I'm doing that, minus a mistake or two. Absolutely, I love Beetle Bailey. This image I took when I was at the Newseum, which was a news museum that's in Washington, D.C. They had a whole hall dedicated to cool comics in the news, so I of course, found myself in that place. Oh, it's good to see you, Jack. Fantastic. How you doing today, Jack? Always read the comics, me too, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to finish the second part of Chapter 5. If you remember on Tuesday, we talked all about vision. I introduced the idea of sensation and perception, and we talked a lot about the vision, about the sense of vision. Now, if you remember from the webinar that we've done this week, the difference between sensation and perception. So you may get the action potentials coming in through your ear or coming in through your eye or coming in through your nose, right? And traveling back to the sensory cortex, but that's just the first part. So perceiving the action potentials is what we would call sensation. But then there's this multi-step process where we decide what it is we're actually looking at. And that process is called perception. And I suggested to you that perception is to a certain extent determined by your prior expectations. You learn what a cup is, you learn what a dog is, you learn what all these things are. And so you sense these organisms, and then you make a judgment about what it is you're looking at. And we'll call that process perception. So today we're going to talk about the other four senses. We're going to talk about hearing, taste, smell, and touch. So we're going to go back through and sort of review these different parts of the sensory experience. Fiery bacon. Who in the hell is fiery bacon? You've got me on that one. Good morning, Yasir. Good to see you. Everybody check in. Go ahead and tell me who fiery bacon is, and I'll figure it out. I love sizzling bacon. Love. All right, whatever. So let's go back and revisit the idea of these sensory cortexes. So if you'll remember from Tuesday, I suggested to you that there are 5 different areas in your brain that are responsible for processing the primary sensory information. They're called primary sensory cortexes because this is where the basic qualities of that perception are perceived. So for example, in your occipital cortex, you perceive lines, you perceive color, you perceive size, and you perceive motion. Those are the primary visual qualities. And just like in your auditory cortex, you perceive pitch and loudness. And so we have primary sensory cortexes that process each of the primary sensory information. We also have association cortexes where we start to build more complete pictures based on the sensory input that we get. So I do want you to know that the primary olfactory cortex and the gustatory cortex are both located in your frontal lobe. Taste and smell are in your frontal lobe. Oh, as well as touch. Touch is at the back of your frontal lobe. Oh, excuse me. The sense of touch is actually in your parietal lobe, right behind your motor cortex. So taste and smell is in your frontal lobe. Touch is in your parietal lobe. Hearing is in your temporal lobe, and vision is in your occipital lobe. So I want you to be familiar with the primary olfactory cortex, the primary gustatory cortex, the primary auditory cortex, the primary visual cortex, and the primary sensory or somatosensory cortex. Okay? All right, before we get started, Can you go over that one more time? Exactly what do you want me to go over, Nicole? I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about. Bacon on fire. Y'all have lost me, man. I have no idea where this joke is gone. Okay, I'm going to wait. Nicole, where each of them is located. Yes. Olfactory cortex and gustatory cortex in your frontal lobe. In your frontal lobe. Okay. Somatosensory cortex is in your parietal lobe. Auditory cortex is in your temporal lobe. And your primary visual cortex is in your occipital lobe. Okay? So, let's talk a little bit about the sense of hearing, shall we? Okay, so if you'll notice for each of the senses in Chapter 5, they're going to have a picture that looks just like this for most of the senses. So you're going to be able to see pictures showing the processing of information as it travels from the periphery to the central nervous system. So information is going to travel all the way from the ear all the way into the auditory cortex, okay? Remember the word transduction. Transduction is the creation of action potentials from mechanical or auditory or external stimulation, okay? So anytime your brain turns some sort of stimulation into a pattern of action potentials, we're going to call that process transduction. So your rods and cones in your eyes, when they are stimulated by light, they create action potentials based on the light stimulation. That's called the transduction of light energy into action potentials. So I want you to be familiar with that term, transduction. Okay? Now, let's see. So let's go ahead and start. In your ear, so you've got this big pinna, this big outer part of your ear, which is designed to catch sound waves and direct them into your auditory canal, as you see here. At the end of your auditory canal, you all have this thing called an eardrum. This eardrum is connected to 3 small bones in your inner ear, and when sound waves come, they cause this eardrum to vibrate, which causes these bones to vibrate, which then causes this thing called an oval window on the outside of your cochlea to vibrate. And inside your cochlea, you have this fluid-filled area called the basilar membrane. So you have this basilar membrane inside your ear. Now it's rolled up, as you can see, and inside this little rolled structure are a bunch of hairs, these hair cells. Now, just like rods and cones are receptor neurons for vision, your hair cells located on your basilar membrane are responsible for collecting wave information and turning it into action potentials. So what happens is when this oval window vibrates as a function of being vibrated by these little bones in your inner ear, they cause the fluid in the basilar membrane to begin vibrating, and it causes these hair cells to move. And these hair cells are then transmit action potentials into your auditory nerve that then goes through your thalamus and then travels to your primary sensory cortex, your primary auditory cortex located in your temporal lobe. And if you'll see the picture here, what you'll notice is with the brain area, you see how we have a right auditory cortex and a left auditory cortex. Both of these cortexes, the information goes through your thalamus. Remember, all sensory information goes through your thalamus before it gets to the sensory cortex, with the exception of smell. Okay? Now, here's the thing. How do we determine how pitch or loudness? And so there's research on on how we detect pitch. Now, pitch is when the sound goes up and down, the scale. So is much higher than ooh. And so as I make these two different sounds and it comes in your ear, it causes your hair cells to vibrate. How do we determine when we're hearing a high-pitched sound as opposed to a low-pitched sound? Okay, so it turns out there are two sort of competing theories about how pitch is decoded. One theory suggests that pitch is determined by how fast the hair cells vibrate. And the idea is the faster they vibrate, the higher the pitch. And that's one theory for how sound is generated, how pitch is perceived in the brain. But another way it works is not only how fast they vibrate, but where in the basilar membrane these hairs vibrate. And it turns out that the hair cells at the beginning of the basilar membrane, when they vibrate, they create high-pitched sounds. And when the hair cells at the end of the basilar membrane vibrate, they perceive the lower-pitched sound. So you see the picture right here, and we have higher amplitude waves. When you get a higher wave, when the amplitude of the, when the distance between the two wavelengths is shorter, you get a higher pitched sound. When they're farther away, you get a lower pitched sound. So that's what they're showing you here with this little picture down below. And what I want you to know is there are two sort of processes by which pitch is determined: the speed of the hair cells vibrating and also the location of the hair cells that vibrate in the ear. And that's what creates the perception of pitch. Well, by the way, thank you very much, Jack. I'm glad you think so. Now, so loudness is actually determined by the height of the waves. So you see we have some higher waves here with higher amplitude. So that's not wavelength, but that's amplitude. So the distance between waves is called wavelength, and that determines pitch. And how high the waves go up and down is called the amplitude of the wave. And it turns out that the amplitude of the wave is what determines the loudness of the sound. Now, if I could just do a sort of an aside note, I'm going to back up for just a second. The same sort of concept works in vision as well. Okay, so visual waves that are perceived by our eyes also have wavelength and also have amplitude. And the wavelength of the light coming into your eye determines what color you see. What color you see, all right? But the amplitude, how high the wavelength is, determines how pure the color is. So if you look at this blue behind me, you'll notice it's kind of a washed out blue. It's called Tar Heel blue. Go Tar Heels, right? And you'll see it's kind of a washed out white blue. So this lighter blue would actually have a lower amplitude than, say, a royal blue that you might find on a nasty Duke uniform. Ew, that dark blue. So the intensity of the color is actually determined by the amplitude of the wave coming in your visual center. And that's just an aside note from Tuesday's lecture. But for us, for hearing, amplitude determines the loudness of the sound. Yes, we are absolutely throwing shade at those stinky old Blue Devils. Thank you very much. Ha 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 ha. Hot Rod, she loves Duke. Buy her a t-shirt, buy her a Carolina t-shirt for Christmas, Leanne, and try to bring her to the good side, okay? Oh my goodness. Physical science my junior year, wavelengths, exactly. Now, here's the cool thing. Your brain determines where sound is based upon how the sound reaches each of your ears. So, sound waves take time to travel, right? And in fact, sound travels slower than light. All right, so that's why you see the explosion or see the lightning and you hear the sound of the thunder a little bit later, because sound waves travel slower. What your auditory cortex does is it receives input from both ears about a sound. Just like your eyes, when you look at something, you get two different eyes, pictures, one from your right eye and one from your left eye. When you hear a sound, you hear it with both your right ear and your left ear. But if the sound is over here on this side of my body, this ear is going to hear it slightly before this ear hears it. If the sound is over here, right, this ear is going to hear it slightly before this ear hears it. And the crazy thing is, your auditory cortex, over the first several months of your life, develops a formula which allows it to decode where a sound is based upon the difference in time that it takes to get to each of your ears. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to stop for just a minute. And Camilla, the adjective royal in front of that blue says enough. Ha ha, very funny, Camilla. You get a 0 for today. Jack Davis, go Clemson. You get a 0 for today. All of you folks, oh my goodness. Holy cow, I can't believe I'm teaching a bunch of infidels today. Okay. Y'all are so funny. Y'all are so funny. Okay. So actually, I guess my picture is a little bit in the way. I do apologize. So that's what I want you to know from sound. I want you to know hair cells. I want you to know the temporal coding and the place coding theories of how we determine pitch. And I want you to know that we determine location of sound based upon the timing and loudness with which it reaches each ear. Okay? Don't tell your parents, man. What happens in class stays in class, right? This is a state secret here. Nobody's going to see it. It's on YouTube, so nobody's going to see what I say, right? Did I see Lydia's question? I did not see Lydia's question. Sometimes when I hear a loud sound, I feel my heart is beating loud. When I hear a loud sound, I feel my heart is beating loud. Are you saying the sound causes you to get excited? That might be what's happening. When you hear a loud sound, it might cause your heart to start beating fast. I don't know, Lydia. That's a hard question. I'm going to have to figure that one out. Do I get an association because I'm not associated with sports? No, you get a 50. Because you're not a Duke fan, I'll give you 50 points. You have to be a Carolina fan to get the other 50 points, okay? Oh, y'all are so funny. Okay, I see we got a couple of people coming in late. Connor, very good to see you. Thanks for showing up today. Yes, and you did miss the football talk because we were talking about how Carolina is the greatest football team ever. Okay, so there you go, Nicole. All right, so that's hearing. I want you to know that. Now let's talk a little bit about taste. Taste and smell are both what we would call chemoreception, whereas your vision and your ears respond to waveform information, just like in physics class, Leanne, okay? Your tongue and your nose, your tongue and your nose respond to chemical information. So you have chemoreceptors that respond to that kind of information. So in your mouth, you have taste receptors, which are the parts of your body that transduce chemical energy into patterns of action potentials, okay? So we still have transduction. In the eye, transduction is turning light waves into action potentials. In the ear, transduction is turning sound waves into action potentials. In the mouth, transduction is turning chemical stimulation into action potentials. Okay? Now, you have these receptor cells on your tongue, and they're located in the 8,000 to 10,000 taste buds that we have in our mouth. Okay, so and the information goes from the taste buds and it travels along the facial nerve through the thalamus to the gustatory cortex located right here. And again, you can see the little picture over that's right underneath me. You'll see how the information is going from the mouth, it's going through the thalamus, and all the way up to the gustatory cortex. Good question. So we have 5 main tastes. You folks all know what sweet is, you all know what sour is, you all know what salty is, and you all know what bitter is. Umami is that rich, not salty, it's that rich, flavorful taste that you feel when you eat a pot roast or mushroom soup. To me, it's kind of like salty. It's that gravy taste, that really good, deep gravy taste that you have, like portobello mushrooms. So we sort of have a sweet taste, a sour taste, a salty taste, a bitter taste, and then, if you will, I like to call it a pot roast taste. That's how I think of umami. I'm not sure what y'all think, but if you like pot roast, but if you've ever had one of those good pot roast with lots of gravy and the mushrooms in it, man, that, my friend, is umami. Okay, like all tastes together. That's an interesting way to put it. I think we actually have special receptor cells for that individual taste. But yeah, to me, umami sort of tastes like everything together. Oh, I am absolutely hungry. Nicole, I had yogurt. I'm trying to eat healthy in the morning, so I had yogurt and carrots for breakfast. I can't wait to finish class so I can go get something to eat. Okay, so we have these 5 different tastes. And if you look at the picture of the tongue right here, what they're going to show you is that you actually taste different tastes on different parts of your tongue. So you have different taste receptors on each of these parts of your tongue. So you have sweet and salty right on the tip of your tongue, right? You have sour on the sides of your tongue. You have bitter way in the back of your tongue. And then you have umami kind of in the middle of your tongue. So you have these different taste receptors that are inside taste buds that are in your mouth. Now, your book suggests, do any of you, how many of you hate broccoli or spinach or green stuff? Do any of you hate that really strong green stuff? I love collard greens. I'm a Southern boy, and I absolutely love me a plate of green collard greens. Broccoli is so good. Me. Okay, here's the deal. There are some people who are actually born with 6 times the number of taste buds, and we call those people super tasters. And the crazy thing is, sometimes super tasters are turned off by really strong foods with strong flavors. So if you don't like broccoli, if you don't like collard greens, if you're one of those person that doesn't like really strong tasting things, you may actually be a super taster. And so if you'll go look in your book, there's a cool little demonstration which will allow you to determine whether or not you are a super taster. Okay? Yes, absolutely, Abby. We taste sweet in the sort of the tip of our tongue. Yeah. Kind of weird. I'm not sure why it evolved that way, that you have different spots of your tongue for tasting. And if I were designing it, I would have put taste buds on all parts of the tongue. But hey, I'm not in charge of anything, right? Okay. So that's taste. Let's talk briefly about smell. Smell is also chemoreception. And just like taste, what occurs here is that your brain transduces action potentials from chemicals. Okay, so the smell is the only sense that doesn't travel through the thalamus. Not exactly sure why. I'll bet that no. You know what? I don't have a good theory why it doesn't travel through the thalamus, but it's the only one that's not processed through the thalamus. Okay, and so what you have in the epithelium inside your nose are olfactory receptors. And these olfactory receptors transduce floating chemicals, or what we call odorants, into action potentials that travel through the olfactory nerve to the primary olfactory cortex in the frontal lobe. It turns out that we have 350 types of different odorant receptors. All right, so we actually have the ability to respond to 350 different chemicals. And what I would argue is that we can actually put these chemicals together to create third sensory experiences, if you will. So patterns among these different types of receptors lead our ability to distinguish millions of smells. Millions of smells. Now, the crazy thing is the intensity of smell is actually processed in our amygdala, which is our emotional center. And this is maybe why when we eat foods, they remind us of happy memories, or they remind us of things that happened to us. Possibly because we're processing these smells in a place close to our memory center. Okay, right. So, here's the deal. Let me stop for a second and answer a couple of questions. I'm not sure what y'all are arguing about with McDonald's in the chat bar. Try to keep it semi on topic if we can. But let's see. Professor, my friend, Etta wants to know, Professor, my friend lost her sense of smell when she was a baby. So do you think she has damaged her receptors, or does she have some kind of brain damage in the area responsible for smell? That's a great question. It could be either or, Etta. That's a very good question. And typically, when we talk about the loss of our senses, we often talk about peripheral damage versus central damage. So which part of your nervous system was damaged? Are you suffering from peripheral nerve damage or central nerve damage? And either one of those could lead to the loss of a sense of smell. And so she may have had some sort of exposure to a teratogen which damaged her olfactory cortex, which leads her to have difficulty with the sense of smell. It could have been the olfactory nerve or olfactory tract was damaged, which leads to the loss of sensory perception in the area of smell. It could be any number of things. I would probably say it doesn't have to. I'll bet it doesn't relate to the olfactory receptors, because all of them would have had to been damaged to lose the sense of smell, if you know what I mean. So it probably depends on whether or not it was nerve damage or tract damage, or whether or not it was damage to the particular area of the brain. Etta, great point. So, this is for class. Do you think we'll be saying random things within a classroom? Right. Okay. If I could stop, it looks like we're getting a little argument in the chat bar. To be quite honest, it would be cool if we could focus on just the class material. And let's not start sniping at each other, because as it was stated in the chat bar, you wouldn't be arguing with people in class. So let's try to keep it on topic if we could. All right. So that's the fourth sense. Now let's talk a little bit about proprioception, which is the recording of touch and pain information. So if I told you the eyes and the ears respond to waveform information, okay, your sense of smell and taste is called chemoreception, all right. We're going to think about the feeling of touch as proprioception, and you have what we call mechanoreceptors who respond to pressure information. So mechanoreceptors are those receptor neurons that turn mechanical or pressure information into action potentials. They transduce physical energy into patterns of action potentials. Okay. So there are multiple sort of proprioception neurons in your body. So you don't just have one sensory neuron like you have rods and cones. You have rods and cones, which are two different types of receptors. You have 6 different types of receptors in your skin all over your body that respond to different types of information. You have neurons that respond to warmth. All right, so heat energy causes these neurons to transduce action potentials. You have cold receptors that respond to cold information and transmit cold into action potentials. And then we have 5 different types of pressure receptors that look at pressure, movement, and vibration, light, fast pressure, light, slow pressure, and stretching perception. So in a sense, you need to know when your arm stretches out like this. And when your muscles stretch out, your brain knows it. When you touch your arm, your brain knows it. When you vibrate on your arm, another neuron responds to it. If you put a hot pack on your arm, another neuron responds to it. If you put a cold pack on your arm, another neuron responds to it. So we have all of these different types of receptors that are responsible for transmitting cold, heat, touch, and vibration from our body parts to our somatosensory cortex that's located in our parietal lobe. All right. Now, this also, so conscious touch, right? So this information that we record from our body is processed 2 ways. The first is called conscious touch, and that's where you know somebody's touching you. Ooh, this shirt is kind of itchy today, right? Or, wow, it's kind of hot in here. Maybe I need to take this coat off. That's what we would call conscious touch, all right? Now, not only does the information transfer up to our somatosensory cortex so we know we're being touched, all right? I'm using a vibrator on my arm right now. So not only does it go to our somatosensory cortex where we know we're being touched, but information is also transmitted to our cerebellum. If you'll remember, I was telling you in chapter 2 that the cerebellum is responsible for balance and motor coordination. In order to be balanced and to coordinate your motor responses, you need to have an awareness of where your body is. So I know that my arm is down here on the side of my body. I know that I've got a foot down at the bottom of my body. And I could take it and I could put this foot up here. Oh my God, that hurts. And I now know that my foot is above my head. So in a sense, my cerebellum is receiving information from my body parts that gives me an idea about how my body is organized and relatively positioned. And we'll call that your kinesthetic sense. And it's processed by your cerebellum. Okay? So that's sort of your kinesthetic sense. The last thing I want to talk about is the sense of pain. Not only do we have neurons, receptor neurons that tell us whether or not our arm is hot or cold, not only do we have sensory neurons that tell us if our arm is being vibrated by a vibrator, like Gabriella's doing it, or being touched, right? Not only do we have proprioception and this heat and cold, but we also have the sense of nociception, the perception of pain. Okay? Now, and we talk about fast fibers and slow fibers. Okay. Yeah, I do have hands and feet. That is kind of crazy, isn't it? So here's the deal. So neurons, axons, come in different sizes. Some of them are fat and some of them are skinny. All right? And it turns out that fat axons, that the action potential travels faster down fat axons than it does down skinny axons, okay? Now, in the area of nociception, you have two different kinds of pain receptors. You have the thick myelinated axons, which transmit sharp pains. And if you've ever stepped on a tack or touched something that's sharp, you know it's very useful that you get that information back quick so you can move your hand away from whatever it is that is acutely damaging your body. All right. Now, if you've ever had an aching pain, right? So I went to the gym and worked out last night and crushed my back muscles, man. I was all on the squats and the deadlifts, and I worked my back out really hard yesterday. And so today my back is kind of achy and sore, right? And those dull aching pains that I'm feeling right now are being transmitted by my slow nociceptor receptors, which transmit pain information much slower, and they give you the experience of of a dull aching pain. So we have two types of pain receptors, one that transmits sharp pains and one that transmits slow aching pains. All right. And I suggest all of you get to the gym and work your bodies out so you can also enjoy the slow aching pain of a good workout. Right? Okay. Now, one thing I do want to point out before I let you go, if you'll see right sort of kind of diagonally to me right here is sort of a picture of the sensory cortex. So if you look at the partial brain picture that I've got down below, that dark blue that's not quite royal blue, if you pull it out and you can kind of slice the brain like it's a piece of cake and pull out that piece of cake. And what you see here is the primary somatosensory cortex. And what you need to see here is they call this the sensory homunculus. And what this does is this demonstrates the relative amount of area on your brain for each of your body parts' sensitivity. So you'll notice that you have more space on your brain to feel your face than you do for your entire leg, right? And that's because it's more important for you to have feelings, because you need to talk and do all kinds of things with the face. You need to smile, you need to frown, you need to say stuff, you need to kiss the ones you love. And that requires very good perception of the parts of the face. So you have more area for feeling your face than you do for your entire leg. Okay? Quick question. Keelan Leak has a question. Is this something that can change also? Are you talking about the sensory cortex changing as a result of damage? If you are, yes. And I'm going to leave you with a crazy story before I go. It turns out that if you'll notice the hand hand area on the sensory cortex is really close to the face area on the sensory cortex. And it turns out, I saw a video one time of a fellow who had his hand amputated. He had his hand amputated, and when the doctor touches his cheek right here, the guy feels like the doctor is stroking his hand as well as his cheek. Could you imagine that? So in a sense, what happened when he lost his hand, that sensory area in his brain that's responsible for responding to his hand, it invaded his facial area. And so now that guy, in a sense, has a map of his hand stuck to his face. Okay, I'm going to answer your question in just a second, Camilla. Okay, but check this out. How quickly does that happen? Here's a sort of a terrible experiment that was done. These doctors took a capuchin monkey, okay, and they mapped each of the capuchin monkey's fingers to its sensory cortex. So when the monkey moved this, when they when they squeezed this particular thumb, right, the monkey this part of the monkey's brain got active. When they pushed this part got active. And they mapped each one of these areas into a unique part of the sensory cortex. After they mapped these areas, they then took a pair of scissors and clipped off one of these monkey's fingers. Okay? They clipped off one of these monkey's fingers. In about 15 minutes, that part of the brain that was working on the part of the finger that was removed suddenly started responding to touch on the finger right beside it. So not only did it happen, but it happened pretty freaking quickly. Okay? So, yeah, Keelan and Camilla, I think y'all are right. It's probably peripheral nerve damage that happened to you, Camilla. A nerve in your leg was damaged, and so now it's not sending information to your brain. So I would concur with Keelan Leak that you probably have peripheral damage rather than any central damage here. I probably did tell you the story. You know what? I probably told you the story about the monkey when I was talking about the motor cortex in chapter 2. I only have a few good stories, Etta, so I like to tell them time and time again. Now he has a super smart finger. That's a great point. Great point. Okay, well, I tell you what, that's all I really had to say for today. I want you to be familiar with the word transduction. So our senses transduce wave energy, chemical energy, and pressure energy into action potentials that are then sent to primary cortexes in the brain where those senses begin to be built. Remember, I told you that they only begin to be built there because in order to have the full sensory experience, you have to put these sensory pieces together in what we call association cortices, sensory association cortices. Vision and hearing respond to waveform information. Smell and taste respond to chemical information. And your sense of touch is it comes from feelings of pressure, the proprioception. And I do want you to know that all of your senses, except for smell, travel through the thalamus. And I would say that that probably suggests that somehow smell was the first primary form of sensory processing that we may have done way down the evolutionary chain. So maybe that's why it wasn't connected through the thalamus. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of quick questions before I end this lecture. Professor, is this normal? The harder I get hit, the less I feel it. When a paper cut, that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure why paper cuts burn like hell, but they are the worst pain in the world, right? And that's a great question. That's a great question. Any hints for the neuromatrix tomorrow? Yes. Great question. It's primarily going to be related to vision tomorrow. Okay? So definitely focus on the visual. You know what? It's vision, and I might ask you to know the name of the different receptor cells. So in your ear, it's hair cells, right? In your smell, it's olfactory receptor cells. And I might want you to know the difference in proprioceptive cells. So you've got fast and slow fibers. But it's mostly going to be about vision, okay? In fact, the name of tomorrow's neuromatrix is called double vision. So it's primarily going to be about vision. How about that? Okay. Well, you know what? I have finished with my lecture for the day. That's all I have to say. If you folks have any questions, you can send me some text through the chat bar. I'll stay on chat for a few minutes after the broadcast starts. Or you can send me a text on Remind. I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Actually, Nicole Ortiz and I had to have a webinar last night to sort out some questions that she had with the lecture. So you can even send me a meeting request, and I'd be more than happy to meet you in Microsoft Teams. Okay? I had a great time. I'm glad you enjoyed the class. I look forward to seeing you in the Neuromatrix this weekend and in class on Tuesday. Take care, and I'll see you soon.